thinking about things that make life more enjoyable, and thinking about my mother, who has been gone for over 60 years, but she was a voracious reader and loved poetry. Now, she wasn't a big, you know, uh, sappy, smarmy, whatever, low poet, and, there wasn't a Rod McEwen book in our house. But she had lots of books of poetry. She had a lot of Ogden Nash. She had a lot of Lord Byron, of Walt Whitman, of E. E. Cummings, of T.S. Eliot, some William Carlos Williams, a lot of different poetry. I think her favorite poet was probably Ogden Nash, because she had quite the sense of humor, and Ogden Nash's poems, if you're familiar with them, tend to be very short and somewhat humorous. The Ogden Nash holds the claim to the shortest poem ever written. It's called Fleas, and its complete content is Adam had 'em. Ogden Nash sometimes wrote just writing like that, or like Algae met a bear. The bear was bulgy, the bulge was algae. Or sometimes he borrowed from other poets, such as Joyce Kilmer's Trees. Only his version had nothing to do with trees. Well, it mentioned them. But it was really about billboards and about what he perceived blight that billboards were becoming along our highways, even way back then. I think that I shall never see a billboard lovely as a tree. Indeed, unless the billboards fall, I'll never see a tree at all. That was Ogden Nash, and my mother loved him. She recited a lot of his poems. Of course, she recited a lot of poems anyway. I have not been, although I love poetry, and I inherited that from her, I'm quite sure. And no, I'm not one of those for all the sappy love poems either. I mean, I can get into them a little bit, but not when you're, the Rod McEwen really sappy stuff. I'm sorry. No, that doesn't fit with me. But poems that deal with human relationships. E. E. Cummings had some great ones. Somewhere I have never traveled gladly beyond, and I can't recite that one anymore. I used to be able to. But when we were covering that in an American Lit class in college, the instructor said that was how he felt about his wife. And I said, I don't think it's about a wife. He said, what do you mean? I said, look at the end of it. He's talking about you being able to close and unclose me and all. But the very last lines, no one, not even the rain, has such small hands. And I took the class back to when my daughter had just come home from the hospital. She was, because she was born a little underweight, she finds it funny that I say that they sent her to the feed yard for about a week before they let us bring her home, because they had to get her up over the 5-pound limit there. But they wanted her to have this particular formula. And so she was on bottles rather than on breast. Well, her mother was making her bottle. I was holding her to kind of keep her quiet, you know. And now you would have to know my daughter, but she is a very intelligent woman. And I say woman because she's 50 years old now. But she's a very intelligent woman and was a very intelligent baby. And you could see, you know, little blue eyes just looking all over the place, taking everything in. No fussing, no crying. Just... And I reached down with just my index finger, just lightly touched the tip of her nose. And she reached up and wrapped her little hand around my index finger and wrapped Dad around her finger at that point. I have to admit, you know, my daughter was one that could get over on me a lot more easily than she should have a lot of times. And still can. But that was my interpretation. And that's the beauty of poetry too. It interprets, it speaks to you by your own life experiences, by your own heart, by what's in you. We spent time in American Lit on Walt Whitman's Song of Myself, which is a very long poem. I wanted to print it out one time, 60 pages. I decided I didn't want to spend that much paper and ink. I could look it up on the net if I needed to. But there are people that, well, that has got to be the most egotistical poem ever written. How do you figure that? Well, look at the first line. I celebrate myself. I sing myself. Yeah? Okay. How does that mean that he's egotistical? Could that not mean that he celebrates his life? That he sings the joy that is in him? And if you've seen it's now a pretty old movie, but if you've seen the movie Dead Poets Society with the late great Robin Williams, who plays an English teacher, and he's a boys' school, and he gets the boys interested in poetry. They're not only reading poetry in class, they've, revived a club that was around when Robin Williams was a student there, the Dead Poets Society, and they're reading poetry on their own. They're out in a cave reading Vachel Lindsay's Congo. But one of the things that happens is that in the classroom they're getting toward the end of Song of Myself. Whitman compares himself to, seems to me, I haven't read this poem in a long time, but it seems to me that it was some kind of large predatory bird. Not an eagle, but maybe like a hawk or something of that nature. An osprey, whatever, but anyway. And he says, just like the bird, he too is not tamed. And then there's the line there, and this is where Robin Williams' character starts working on the boys. I sound my barbaric yawp over the rooftops of the world. Then he has the boys standing up one by one and sounding their barbaric yawp. And, one boy's kind of, No, 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 no. A barbaric yelp. Get it out there. In a way, kind of reminded me of my high school football coach. Yeah. And he didn't teach us poetry. In fact, I didn't have him for any classes because he was the driver education teacher. And I'd already had driver's ed when he was hired. I had driver's ed from the previous football coach who was now the guidance counselor. But he would try to get us to put, a little extra effort in there. Get it out there, show it. You got it, show it. If you got it, flaunt it. Now, that's the beauty of poetry. It can bring things out in you that you didn't know you had. Well, another beauty of poetry, because we've already mentioned it, speaking to you from you. It's not, if you're reading T.S. Eliot's love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which, then again, in that college American Lit class, I thought we were going to spend the whole semester on that one. Man, but if you're reading that, or if you're reading, something very short like, William Carlos Williams' Ode to a Red Wheelbarrow, I think it is, or something like that, or Ode to a Red Wagon, it's, or even something shorter. Maybe you're reading Fleas. But the poem, first of all, speaks to you what the poet says. Then it speaks to you, from your experience, like what I said about my daughter. And then finally, it brings something out in you that you may have not known was there. Happens all the time. There again, not necessarily if you're reading the sappy commercial stuff. But if you're reading Walt Whitman, T.S. Eliot, Carl Sandburg, E.E. Cummings, William Carlos Williams, Ogden Nash, Dr. Seuss for that matter, this is the way that it can work. This is the way that it should work. This is the way that it does what this channel is all about, and adds some joy and a little barbaric yawp to your life.